Mishpatim, page 416, 417. And it begins, Ve'ela ha-mishpatim asher tasim lifneim. And these are the mishpatim, I'll explain what that is, that I placed before you. Mishpatim are a type of mitzvahs, also a type of laws. Usually they mean ones that appear to be mundane. In other words, you have a mitzvah, you have to put on tefillin. That's not mundane, right? That's not like something a person would do normally. But if I say to you, here it is, you have to treat orphans well. You have to, you're not allowed to charge interest, right? These are like laws that the government would make, right? They're not religious laws. They appear to be very secular, necessary laws to run a country. You have to have laws. You have to tell people don't steal. If you get into a car accident, right, you have to be responsible. You can't drive away without doing it, right? Those are mishpatim. While you have a chok, for instance, another type of a law, like a chok, the example is shatnez. You're not allowed to wear wool and linen in your clothes. Right? Like the Canadian government would never say that. Like, what do they? Right? That's not a law that you need to have to run a country. That's a different type. So mishpatim are these what seems to be mundane laws. But so you'd think the parsha would begin, these are the mishpatim that I'm placing before you. But it doesn't. It says, and these are the mishpatim I'm placing before you. So and, why is it saying and? And what? It's the first word of the parsha, right? So clearly it's carrying on from the line before, right? Because the Torah itself is not split into parshas. Right? The Torah is split into parshas by us. Right? We did it as a way to be able to read through the Torah in the course of a year. But even though there are meaning in why the rabbi split it up, right, it's not the Torah itself. But why here would they begin a parsha then? Why would the rabbis begin the parsha with a word that says and? That's, like if they were going to university, they'd lose a grade for that. They start a word with an and, start a chapter with an and, it makes no sense, right? So Rashi has the same question. Right? It says about ve'ela mishpatim. And Rashi says, Kol mokum shnamar ela. Says first thing, anywhere where you begin a sentence with the word ela, these, right? The word these. What does it tell you besides the translation? So he says psal asa rishonim. He says it says that the things that it's like saying I have 6 donuts and I have a car. Okay, so if you say I have 6 donuts, and then you stop and you say, and these are the things that I have. So it's coming to tell you that the 6 donuts you don't have anymore. In other words, you start with Eila, with this, means that everything before doesn't apply anymore. Only from this point on it applies. But that's what Rashi says. But then he says, V'Eila, but what does it mean when it says and this, or and these? So then he says, Mosifal Rishonim. It comes to tell you that whatever those were, these are. So if I give you a description that I have 6 of the finest donuts in the world, and I have a car, I'm telling you that I have the finest car also. Right? I'm saying that there's a similarity between the 2 lines. While in the first case, we're excluding the first and going with the second. They're 2 independent. But by adding the and, it's saying that the ones in the beginning, the traits of the first sentence carry over into the second sentence. Okay? So that's very nice. But what's it mean here? So this is a very, very important thing. And Rashi says, what does he say? Maha Rishonim, just like last week's Parsha came from Mount Sinai, the giving of the Torah, right? All of the laws of the giving that we got at the giving of the Torah, the 10 Commandments, they come from God, right? God said these. We know that. So just like those came from Mount Sinai, from God, Af Elu Misanai, the laws that you're about to learn also come from God. Well, don't you think you know that? Like, what does Rashi say? That's the news here. That's what it's telling you. The reason the parsha begins, and these are the laws that I'm placing before you, come from God. Well, it's in the Torah, right? Where did the Torah come from? From God. So why are you telling me that these laws come from God? The ones last week came from God. So it's telling you an important point. We understand when it says you should keep the Sabbath day, keep it holy, right? That comes from God. First thing, he said it on Mount Sinai. Said it at the giving of the Torah, in the 10 Commandments, right there. We're standing there, we hear him say it. That's a holy thing, right? But here it says, the guy, you have a slave, and the slave comes in and he gets married. Now it's time for the slave to leave. Does he take his wife or not? You say, you know what, that's government rules. That's not holy. That's how the government runs. You have to have laws. You have to run a government, right? Everybody has to have a government and they have to have rules to know how to live your life, right? So you want to tell me that if I have a slave, so for 6 years he works for me, in the 7th year he goes out. Okay, so I have to know that according to the laws of this country, slaves are slaves for 6 years, not for their whole life. For 6 years and that's it. But but Rashi is saying that's not what it means. What it's telling you is, just like keeping Shabbos comes from God and it's holy, so too the laws and the servants come from God and it's holy. Even though it appears mundane, it appears that this is a law that any country would come up with, nevertheless these are holy. And it teaches us a number of important things. First thing, it teaches us that everything that we do, no matter how secular it seems, how non-holy it seems, we go grocery shopping, we wash the dishes, we change a diaper, right? Very mundane things, that these are actually actions that have holy sources, right? We are not just thinking of it as a mundane thing. All of the rules, all of the mitzvahs, all of the actions that we do are rooted in holiness. Not only are they, but we have to realize that they are. And just like it says to keep Shabbos is a holy mitzvah, so too to not steal is a holy mitzvah. Right? Just like keeping kosher is a holy mitzvah, so too not cutting somebody off when you drive is a holy mitzvah. That's what it's telling you. And how do you see it? We have controversies here in Canada and in the Western world in a lot of areas. Well, let's pick one. Death. What's the definition of death? Person goes to the hospital, right? They're in the hospital bed and they're brain dead, but their body's working. Are they dead or are they not dead? How about a person whose body is not working but his brain's alive? Right? Is he alive or is he dead? How about a fetus before he's born? Is he a human or is he not a human? Does he become a human? When does he become a human? Are we pro-choice? That means he becomes a human when he's born. Are we pro-life? No, he becomes a human the moment he's conceived. Or there was even there's these two fellows who developed the concept of DNA, right? Crick's,
Watson and
Crick. So Watson was involved with government over in the Netherlands. He was involved with trying to set rules, and one of the rules he said was, let us define a human as a child who's born 30 days, who's born and lived 30 days. Less than 30 days, he's not human. At 30 days, he becomes human. So why? Because if a child's born and he's full of birth defects, you don't have to keep him. You can is a drain on society. What kind of a life is he going to have? Terrible. You let him die, right? Because he's not human yet. He'll be human at 30 days. So you have 30 days to figure out who should live, who should die. He said, that's how we should define life. Other people say, no, define life. It's a human being the moment it's born. Others say, no, it's a human being as soon as he's conceived. Which one's true? Who's right? We don't know who's right. Right? Why? Because these laws are made by human beings. But God tells us the answer. God tells us what's the definition of life, what's the definition of death. He tells it to us. So we know the answer. So it's not mundane. It appears mundane, but it's not mundane. Okay, I picked an example of life and death, so maybe people won't say that's mundane. But how about, something that's much less so? How about, listen, you're walking down the road and you see that two cars have broken down, right? And both on the same road. One of them is your friend's car, and he's stuck. And one of them is a guy that's really mean to you. He's terrible to you, and you don't like him because of how he treats you. And his car is broken down, he's stuck. Now, so you have a number of questions. First thing is, do you care? Like we do, you could drive away and look over to the left, and you don't see anybody, and you just keep going. And the guy says, why didn't you stop? I didn't even see you. Right? You can do that. You can stop and help your friend. Right? It's your friend. I mean, you're not going to help your friend? Right? Or you stop and you can help your enemy. Which do you do? What do you do? Right? And is it a religious obligation? Is it a religious thing, or is it, it's how I feel? So the Torah tells us that if you are going on the way and you see that a person's donkey, and the donkey has so much on its back that when it's trying to go up a hill, it can't do it. It's under great pain, right? You have an obligation to stop and unload the donkey, and help the donkey go up the hill, and then reload the donkey for your friend and do it. That means you're obligated to not look the other way. You have to do something. Okay, but who do you do it for, your friend or your enemy? So you ask any legislator in the world, and he's going to say, well, we can't tell you who to do it for. But of course you're going to do it for your friend, right? You're going to do it for your friend before you do it for a guy you don't like. You're going to show the guy you don't like, you see what happens when you're not nice to me? I'm not going to help you with your flat tire. But this guy's nice to me, I'm going to help him with his flat tire. But the Torah says, no, you're obligated to help the person you don't get along with first. Because not only are you doing the mitzvah of helping, but you were working on your character. That you shouldn't have people you dislike, even unless they're evil, but which is very rare. But if you find a situation like that, you should know you shouldn't be disliking people. So you should go out of your way to help the one that you don't like. Now that's not going to be, no government would legislate that. The Torah does. That's why the Rashi is telling us these laws are holy. You need to know that just like God says keep Shabbos, God says treat other people with dignity. When God says keep kosher, He says if a person needs a loan, you should give him a loan. That's what it says. It's not that one is a holy mitzvah and one is business. Everything is a holy mitzvah. That's the point of what Rashi is saying. So now that we learn this next parsha, we now should understand that just like the Ten Commandments came from God, so too every mitzvah we're about to learn comes from God. Just like the Ten Commandments are holy, and they're here to make you holy, so too are these mitzvahs holy, and they're here to make you holy. So now we have the introduction to what we're going to learn, right? That's what that tells us. So the first thing it talks about is a slave. It says, Ki sikna eved ivri, you have acquired a Jewish slave. Now, first thing is, how does a person get a Jewish slave? What's a Jewish slave? A Jewish slave is a person who usually what's happened is he got himself into debt, and he can't get out of debt. Right? So in most of the world, when a person got into debt, they put him in debtor's prison, which means he'll never get out of debt because he can't work. He's in prison. And he doesn't work off the debt. He's in there until somebody pays off the debt. So if he owes money to people and he can't pay it back, the rest of his life is in jail until somebody pays it off, right? But with us, we say, people do get in debt. These things happen. So if a person's in such a situation where he's in so much debt that he can't get out, what he does is he sells himself as a slave. Right? Now, we have to understand the word slave is not what comes to mind. But he sells himself as a slave. The reason he's a slave rather than a servant is that he doesn't get paid for his work. His debt is paid. The debt that he has is paid. And he's supported for 6 years. He has to work for 6 years. He doesn't get a paycheck. But if he would get a paycheck, it would just go into savings because he has no expenses. The master supports him, gives him a place to sleep, takes care of his family, feeds him, right? Treats him, takes care of him in every way. So that the servant, he still makes money on him, right? I have a guy, I put him up in my house, but he has to work all day for me and I don't pay him, right? So he's basically working for room and board a whole day. But that's because he owed me $100,000 and I've wiped out the debt. And he only works for me for 6 years. At the end of 6 years, he goes free and he doesn't have the debt anymore. The debt's gone. So, like, how many people we know, they get into debt, the rest of their life they're in debt, even if they are free. They can try paying it off. You ever look at your credit card? They have a rule in Canada that on your credit card is supposed to tell you that if you pay the minimum payment every month, how long will it take you to pay it off? It's like 75 years. You pay the $45 a month on your $3,000 credit card bill. It will take you 75 years to pay this off, right? Well, here you have a guy who could owe $100,000. 6 years, he's free. He's got nothing, right? No debt and no bad credit, right? So that's what the idea. Now, how is a slave treated in Judaism? It's not at all what we think. When we think of slaves, we think like what the Americans did with the blacks in the South, right? That basically they had no human rights. You could kill them if you wanted. You could do anything you want to them, right? They worked for you, and you gave them the worst possible things you could. They slept under the house or in the barn or whatever, and you gave them the leftover food. And you didn't educate them. They were animals that could think. That's how they were treated. But not in the Torah. In the Torah it says, if you have a slave, he is to be treated with dignity. If you have one pillow, he gets it, not you. If you have one blanket, he gets it, not you. In other words, he has to be treated well because he's a human being. He's a human being who made a mistake. And he's getting out of the mistake because God built this into the system so that a person would not be in debt the rest of their life. And it's a bit demeaning, but nevertheless, he is treated well. Now, he does lose something. He loses his independence. He loses his ability to make decisions. Like, he can't decide what to have for dinner, but you have to give him food for dinner, and it has to be as good as your food. And he can't decide where he's going to live, but you have to give him a place to live, and it has to be nice, and it has to be clean, and it has to be as good as where you sleep. Right? So it's a big deal. That's not at all the concept of what we think. So the whole Jewish concept of slavery is very different than the current understanding of slavery. So when people want to say, you see, Jews had slaves, we didn't have slaves like they're talking, right? Like people talk about. It was considered almost a kindness to take in a slave, because they were treated well. They're no longer in debt. You have to basically wipe out their debt, and you have to treat them like a guest, like you're running a hotel. But they work for you, and they don't get paid for their work. So you come out ahead, right? But only for 6 years. At the end of the 6 years, that's it. The 7th year, they go free. You lost them. Right? If you were running a business and your business was successful because you didn't have to pay your people that worked for you, it's only going to last 6 years. You better be ready, right? So it's different. Because a slave in the southern part of America, they were slaves from the day they were born until the day they died, and they died pretty quick because you didn't take care of them, right? So that's a big difference. Now, another question that comes up is, let's be serious here. The Jews just came out of Egypt, right? They just got the Torah. So you don't think there's something a little bit more pertinent that God could say to them? When you have a slave, you should keep him for 6 years and let him go. Well, these guys are wandering the desert. They don't have slaves. They don't got nothing. They're wandering the desert. They just left Egypt. They got the Torah. They're flying high spiritually, but what do you mean I've got a slave? I don't even have a house. Where am I going to put a slave? Right? Why are you talking to me about slaves? Talk to me about anything else. But the first thing it says, right, the first rule that the Torah tells you after they leave Sinai is how to treat a slave. Well, thank you, but I'm not going to have a slave until I get to Israel in 40 years. Then maybe we'll talk about slaves. But what are you telling me now? Right? It doesn't make a lot of sense. Of all the things, God knows this. Why is he telling this now? So the commentaries say it's because of the Roman expression of carpe diem. Make use of the moment. The Jews just came out of Egypt, right? They just came out, and they were stuck in Egypt, and they were slaves. And because they were slaves, they understand what it means to be a slave. Even though our concept of slavery is much different than the concept of slavery that the Egyptians did to us. And the Egyptians did to us what we think a slave is. Right? It was horrible. Nevertheless, the Jews came out and they said, God said to them, when you have a slave, this is how you treat him. Why? Because you were slaves, and you know what it's like. And in 6 months, in a year, they might forget that they were slaves. They may not feel that pain anymore. So if I tell you, treat your slaves well, you might not listen. But now you're going to remember it. So God says, I'm going to seize the moment. You're in the midst of it. It's like, a guy gets, you see it all the time. I tell somebody, you shouldn't smoke cigarettes. It's bad for you. Right? So what's the guy going to say to me? He's going to say, oh, you're the first person to ever tell me that. Now that you tell me that, I'm going to stop right now. Well, nobody ever quit smoking cigarettes because some guy walked up to him and told him, don't smoke, it's bad for you. Everybody knows it's bad for them. And for whatever reason, they smoke, but everyone knows it. You're not going to tell them a surprise. So what good is it? So I'll tell you how you do it. You take a guy, you bring him with you to the emphysema ward in the hospital, where you got people smoking cigarettes through a hole in their neck, right? We've seen people like that, right? Bring him there and let him see that. You know what'll happen? Maybe only for an hour, maybe a day, he'll stop smoking because it hits him right in the face, like, whoa. This is what's going to happen to me, right? So why is it any different when he sees that and then when I tell him? Does he not believe me? Of course he believes me. The difference is he's experienced it. He experiences it. I've smoked. Like I say, bring your cigarettes with you. And we're smoking right up to the door of the hospital, and he walks into the hospital, right? Or you're driving your car down the highway, right? And you're going the speed limit, and some guy drives by you like double the speed limit. He's going like 200 kilometers an hour, right? And you're driving, you say, well, this guy can go 200, I can go 120, I mean, he's not getting a ticket, and he's not getting hurt, so I'll go 120. So you go 120. After about 3 minutes, you look on the side of the road, and his car is off the road, smashed up, and the police are there, right? So what do you do? Wait, you don't just slow down because you see the police. You slow down because it's suddenly become real to you that what you're doing is dangerous. Before, it's not dangerous. If I told a guy, you're driving too fast for the road, he'll say, oh, you're the first person who ever told me that, right? No, of course, it's going to do nothing. But if he sees that, it will. That's what's happening here. God tells us how to treat a slave because he knows that we know what it feels like to be a slave. And in 6 months, we may not know anymore. Or in a year, we may not know anymore. So he tells us now, even though it's not pertinent to us now, he wants us to integrate, or the better words, really amalgamate into our psyche, into our soul, that's how you treat a slave, not the way you were treated. And if you would wait until we were about to get slaves, when we go to Israel, right, the people wouldn't have the same feeling. So that's why he tells us now. Right, and then I sent something to my daughter that I wrote from this next part. It says, if you look in line 3 in Gimel, in English it says, if he shall arrive by himself, he shall leave by himself. If he is the husband of a woman, his wife shall leave with him. Okay? So if a man gets a married man becomes your slave, right? He comes in with his wife. He has to take care of his wife too, because you don't make them live separate. Then he leaves with his wife. When at the end of the 6 years, he leaves with his wife. He goes out also. So, but that's not really what it says. They're interpreting it in the translation. What it really says, im begapo yavo, begapo yetze. What gapo? What does that mean? That word gapo. Gapo means his cloak, like his coat. If with his coat he comes, he goes out with his coat. If he's a husband of a woman, he should come in with his wife. He takes his wife with him. So what does it mean if he comes in with his coat? He goes out with his coat, right? And then what's it got to do with it being married? Right? Well, he comes in with his shoes, goes out with his shoes. Would you think that you should keep his coat? So the answer is that the coat is a metaphor. It's a symbol. You know, when like traditionally, for instance, my family are German, and the German Jews have a custom that at a wedding, you put a tallis on, and at a certain point, near the end of the ceremony, the tallis is taken from the man and it's extended onto the bride, so that the bride and the groom are under the tallis. At first, it's just the man. Why? What is that? At first, the man is where it's his. He's on his own. Now it's us. So he puts her under his tallis, right? The tallis is a symbol of clothing. That's what a tallis is. It's clothing. Right? When God says you should wear tzitzis, he doesn't mean you should wear a tallis. He means if you're wearing a toga, right, four-cornered clothes, you have to put tzitzis on it. We don't wear togas, so we want to do the mitzvah, so we wear a tallis. So, but the tallis is a symbol of our clothing, the gapo, right? I mean, your clothing. Guy comes in with clothing, he goes out with clothing. So it's telling you the following: if a person, when a person is single, a man is single, right? He thinks about his clothes. He doesn't have anyone else to think about. He doesn't think about her clothes. There's no her. He doesn't think about his kids' clothes. There are no kids. It's just him. When a man is single, he is his world. That's it. He's his world. There's nobody else but me. I want to go to a concert. I buy one ticket. I want to go to a show. I buy one ticket. I want to take a vacation. I buy one ticket. I want to buy 2 tickets. That's one. I'm by myself. I'm me. When a man gets married, his perception of who he is changes. It's supposed to change. Changes. I hope it changes. He becomes us. Us becomes me. Right? Like, I say all the time, you can't dislike a man's wife and think that guy's going to be friends with you. You can love him and not like his wife, but if he knows you don't like his wife, you can't be friends. It's like the same person. Right? It just doesn't work. The same idea here. When a guy gets married, he doesn't think about his own clothes. Now he has to think about her clothes. Right? And he walks by a woman's clothes store, it's on sale, he tells his wife, right? He doesn't, before he's married, he wouldn't do that. He only cares about himself. So what happens, just like in the wedding, I'm wearing my tallis, and then at a certain point of the wedding where we're getting married now, I put my tallis on her as well, because she is now a part of me. I'm a part of her. We're one now. I care about her clothing. I care about her taking care of her. So I extend my definition of I becomes we becomes I. Right? So here, if the guy comes in only with his clothes, he's a single man, comes in with his stuff, right? He comes in, pegapo yetze, he goes out by himself. But im balisha, but if he's married, right, Yotze Ishtoimo, his wife goes with him. So they're telling us a simple rule. If a guy comes in single, he goes out single. If a guy comes in married, he goes out married, right? But it's telling us more than that. It's telling us that a man understands that first, the man is a world to himself. That's all he sees. But then as he gets married, he starts to extend that. And then and if he doesn't, that's why people's marriages fail, right? Very often. Because the man only, like, he wants separate bank accounts. He thinks about himself. He wants to still go out with the guys all the time. He doesn't see, like, he doesn't extend his definition of care, of interest to a group. And then, then when you have children, it's even bigger, right? And the grandchildren is even bigger. Like, your definition of I becomes much larger. Right? That's how it's supposed to be. And that the Torah is telling us this is a reality. Men are like this, and then when they get married, they have to be able to extend it. That's why, for instance, at a bris, there's one of the things we say to bris is, we say Zeh HaKatan, this is the small one, right? Gadol Yeh, he will be big. Right? Literally it means he's a little baby. Now he's going to grow up, right? And we want him to grow up with Torah, and he should get married, have chuppah, and good deeds. Right? That's what it says. So you said, but the commentaries say that it's evident he's small and he's going to get big. Any baby who stays alive gets big. You don't stay small, right? You don't have an adult who's the size of a baby. All babies grow up. It's just how it is. Either they grow up or they're not living. Right, so what do you have to say? This is a small one, he's going to get big. What are you teaching me? I know that. All babies grow up. So we have to understand really what it's saying. Is that right now he's a katan, that is, he's thinking small, thinks of himself. And babies do that. A baby will wake up the whole world, no matter what you're going through. Why? Because his diaper's wet. He doesn't care that you've been up for 3 days. He doesn't care that your own mother is sick and you have to take care of her, and you're exhausted and you're sick. Baby wakes up, my diaper is wet, the whole world has to get up until thy diaper is better. Right? I don't care. Right? Baby only thinks of himself. As we get older, right, we hope that idea expands. Like we see it in education. Right now, they learn to play, they learn how to share. But in reality, our idea is that a small one, a child, right, even an adult who's a small person, thinks only of themselves. But a gadol does not mean that he grew up. Right? What is a gadol? A gadol means, in our expression, we call a great rabbi a gadol. Right? A great person is called a gadol. Why is that? Because he cares about others. A person who cares about others is called great. That's the definition with us. Not that you're big, physically big. You are big because you have interest in others. Like it says, if you look back in the Parsha, it said Moshe grew up, and then it says, and then a few lines later it says, and Moshe grew up again, and he went out among his people. So the story says, we know he grew up. He was living in Pharaoh's castle. He was a little baby when he went in. Now he's at least an adolescent. Of course he grew up. So why does it tell it twice? So it tells you twice because one time he got older. That's true. He got older. You knew that. The second time he became great. How do you know? Because it says, and Moshe became gadol, and he went among his people. I mean, Moshe's living in the palace. Right? He could have a wonderful life in the palace, eating, drinking, do whatever he wants, no laws. He's Pharaoh's son, so to speak. He can kill who he wants. He can do whatever he wants. He's Pharaoh's son, as far as the world's concerned. He's the prince of Egypt. But what does he do? He sees the Jewish people out there, and he knows that he's Jewish. So he goes and he hangs around with the slaves, and he helps them. And that's because he was a gadol. He was a great person. And that's what a great person is. So when we talk about the idea that a baby's small and then he gets big, it means that he expands his purview of who he is. First, I'm only me. Now I'm me and my wife. Now I'm me and my wife and my kids. That's who I am. You insult my kids, you insult me. You insult my wife, you insult me. You're not nice to my wife, you're not nice to me. You can't come to me and say, I like you, but I don't like your wife. You may as well say, I don't like any of you, because you can't get past that. That's it, right? That's what it means here. He comes in with his clothes, right? If he's a guy who can't get beyond his clothes, he goes out with his clothes. That's all he's got. He comes in with a wife. Now he's already seeing beyond himself. He goes out with his wife. He goes out in that manner. Right? So that's a few of the ideas that it's telling us when we're discussing this concept of a slave. And that's just the first few lines. We'll skip some of the rest of the slaves. We then have a whole series of laws of murder, of injuries. Right here, there's not. I don't have a lot to say about this, but it's important to say. On 422 and 423, we have the famous line that it says in English. It says, "But if there shall be a fatality, then you shall award a life for a life, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot, a burn for a burn, a wound for a wound, a bruise for a bruise. If a man shall strike the eye of his slave or the eye of his maidservant and destroy it, he shall set him free. If he knocks out the tooth of his slave or the tooth of his maidservant, he shall set him free." All right, so first it tells us, right, an eye for an eye. I knock out your eye, then the court will come and say, okay, you can take out his eye. That's what it sounds like, right? If I break your leg, the court will say, okay, you can break his leg. That's definitely what society thinks. If you ask people what is biblical justice, they'll say an eye for an eye, right? But that's not true. Rashi says it, the Talmud says it, everybody tells us this does not mean the literal sense. If you poke out someone's eye, the court will say he can poke your eye out. What it's telling you is that if you hurt somebody physically, you hurt somebody's eye, right? So then you have to pay him the worth of the eye. How has his life changed because of it? If you have a person, let's say you have a person who was on the way to becoming a doctor, and you injure them and they can't use their hands anymore. So they're going to be a surgeon. They're not going to be a surgeon now. You have to pay him what he would have made had you not done that. You're not cutting your hand off. You're saying that I have to pay the equivalent of your hand and what your hand would have done for you. That's what the Torah is telling us. An eye for an eye does not mean you poke out the guy's eye. It means that you have to pay the equivalent of it. I mean, even though it seems to say that, the Talmud says this is a perfect example where you don't take the Torah literally. It's not meant to be fundamental, right? It's not that it's not literal. It's not fundamental. Fundamentalists will read this and say, literally it says a leg for a leg. So therefore, they'll come and say, if you get some of these real fundamentalist religious people, if you break my leg, then in ancient Jewish times, the court would say, I can break your leg. Well, what sense is that? It makes no sense. That is not true. That's not biblical justice. Biblical justice is that I take into account that I injured your leg, and I have to take into account the effect of that on your life. Not just that I have to pay a penalty for hurting you, but I have to pay a penalty that is equivalent to the loss you have throughout your life because of what I did. That's what the Torah is telling us. Okay, and then it goes on to say what happens if you hurt a slave, right? And there with a slave, it's a little different because a slave, not only do you have to pay for the damages you did, but he goes free. Why? Because you no longer deserve to have a slave. You don't deserve to have a slave if you're going to abuse the slave. On the one hand, it says that the Talmud says when a master takes a slave, he takes a master for himself. That's what he's really doing, because the laws of slavery are so intense that the slave is not treated like a slave. He's treated like an equal or a master. So if I take a slave, I'm really taking a master. But nevertheless, I do benefit. I'm paying him, right, to live. I'm just paying him enough, to sustain him. That he said, if I eat meat, he eats meat. If I don't eat meat, he doesn't eat meat. If I have a pillow, he has a pillow. If I only have one pillow, he gets it. If I have a blanket, he gets it. If I have two, we each get one. Right? That's how it's supposed to be. Right? So but the bottom line is, he works for me. I'm making money off him, and I don't have the privilege anymore of doing that because I've shown that I can't be trusted with people. I injured him, so I have to pay the worth of what I've injured. Plus, I have to let him go free, and his debt's paid, as if he worked all the 6 years. That's what that's telling you. If we look at the bottom of the page, here we find something that, for us, I don't think is startling, but society, there's an example where society doesn't really understand. And it says here in English, in 28, if an ox shall gore a man or woman, and he shall die, right, an ox gores the human dies, the ox shall be stoned. That means it should be killed. Its flesh may not be eaten, and the owner of the ox shall be innocent. But if it was an ox that gores habitually from yesterday and the day before yesterday, and its owners have been warned but did not guard it, and it killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and even its owner shall die. So what are we telling you here? Number one is the life of an animal is not the life of a human. Right? It's not. A human life and an animal life are not the same. That's not to say that we have laws that we must be sensitive to the pain of animals, right? Torture and pain for animals. We have to, by Torah law, we are required to be sensitive to that and to take care of it. But they're not human. Don't mistake that. They are not human. They're not equal to humans. And when people start thinking that that's the case, they're not raising animals. They're lowering humans. Right? Hitler had laws like that. Hitler, in the same convention that they made the laws that took away human rights from Jews, that you could go into a Jew's house and take their belongings with no police intervention. You could kill a Jew, attack a Jew, and there's nothing society will do to you. Right? The same convention made their laws. They said that you're not allowed to bring a circus into Berlin. Why? Because the circuses treated their animals badly, and we don't allow people that treat animals badly in Nazi Germany. But you can treat humans badly, but you can't treat animals badly. Why? Because they're a bit confused here, right? Because they're equating humans and animals. And my opinion is that when people equate humans with animals, they're not raising animals to the level of humans. They're lowering humans to less than they are. And that's the examples we see. So when we hear about groups today that are doing this, it might not be the intention of an individual, but my opinion is that they're equating us with animals. So when you hear the stereotypical question, and you get this on talk radio all the time, and it's a point of being inane, but you hear it all the time where the talk radio host gets an animal rights person on the phone, and the animal rights person will talk about how you have to treat animals right, and that they're just as important as humans, and they have life, and they have pain, and they have emotional pain, and you have to treat them in a certain way, right? We hear it. We've all heard it. So the guy asks him a question, and it's always the same question, just in different ways. And he basically says to him, okay, I want you to answer the following question. You're driving on the road late at night, and it's really bad weather, and your car goes into a skid. But it's a controlled skid, so you have the ability to make certain decisions. But one of them is not that you won't skid. You are going to skid. If you skid to the right, you will hit a child and kill him. If you skid to the left, you'll hit a deer and kill it. Which do you do? And the answer almost always is, I can't answer the question. Because either way, it's wrong. I can't tell you to hit the child and not the animal. I can't tell you to hit the animal and not the child. Because they equate the two. Right? They see them both as the same. Then this shows us the absurdity of the idea. The Torah is telling you animals must be treated with dignity, and they must be observed, so they shouldn't be in pain. But they're not humans. Humans take precedence over animals. So if an animal kills a human, you kill the animal. A mistake, it doesn't matter. Kill the animal. You can't have an animal killing people. Remember, back then, people had animals in the city. You had a cow, you had an ox, you had animals. People needed animals to live. They were work animals, they were for food, whatever, they had them. So it's possible that an ox could get out of its field and it could run into the street and kill somebody. So you'd say, well, he didn't know better, he was in a bad mood, his parents didn't treat him nicely, whatever it is. No, you kill him. It's not like a human. A human, you have different ways of understanding it, but you just kill him. And what happens if the owner doesn't follow the Torah and he says, no, animals have rights, I got to take care of my animal, why should I kill him, I'll just guard him and he won't go out again, and he goes out again, now the owner's in trouble. Now the owner's going to get punished too, because now he's not acting correctly. He's putting people in danger for the sake of an animal, and that you can't do. That's why even here you have laws that you can't have certain animals in your house. You can't have like poisonous snakes. You can't have like, let's say, you can't have a wolf in your yard. You own a wolf. You can't own an alligator because they're dangerous animals. They're not pets. You might think it's a pet. You might want to have it as a pet. You might have a great little cage to keep them in. But if they get out, somebody will be dead, right? That's when it's going to happen. Someone will be killed. So you can't do that. So that because society has that right. That's what it's telling us here. That society has the right and the obligation to make us understand that human beings take precedence over animals. But it doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want with animals. And the same thing goes on. If we look at 424 and 425, there it also tells us in line 33, it says, if a man shall uncover a pit, or if a man shall dig a pit and not cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit shall make restitution. He shall return money to its owner, and the carcass shall be his. Right? Now, if it was the same thing where a man puts what's the guy doing? The guy's going in the street, like going on Clark Avenue, and he digs a hole in the street. For whatever reason, he digs a hole. and somebody walks by and they don't see the hole, they fall in. Right? So let's say a guy goes by with his horse. The horse falls in, breaks his leg. Now he can't use the horse, right? So he has to pay a restitution for the horse because he dug the hole, right? People, you don't dig a hole in the street, right? If there's a hole in the street, cover it up, right? But you don't just leave the hole there, right? So whatever a person falls in, right? You're responsible. You can't do that. You can't put a dangerous situation in the public. You can't do that. So the Torah is telling you if you go in a city street and there's a hole in the city street, right? You can't just leave it open. You got to cover it. And if you don't take the time, you yourself, to cover that hole, right? Right? It's not even your hole. But you don't cover the hole. You're responsible. You have to take care of it. And that's what it's telling you here. And it's important to understand that we have a responsibility to society to act in a certain way. You can't, here in the modern world today, we have all types of legislation that if you want to sell food, the food has to be safe, right? You can't sell poison. You can't sell food that's spoiled, right? It has to really be what it says. You sell drugs. It has to be it has to be that drug. Pharmaceuticals. You can't say it. Like lately they find that from the East, a lot of times they'll have knockoffs. So you have knockoff drugs that are fake. They're not real drugs, and people die. They don't realize it. And let's say a pharmacy is either trying to make extra money, or the pharmacies was tricked themselves, and they're distributing pills that look exactly like the real thing, but they don't do any good, or they've got the wrong drug in it. People will die. You have an obligation to not do things that are unsafe to society, right? And the Torah tells you that, right? And that's a holy mitzvah. You can't make some type of a detriment into the society and then think nothing of it. And if you see it, you have to take care of it as well. Even if you didn't do it, the guy didn't dig the hole. He uncovered it. He's walking down the street and he sees a piece of wood. And he picks up a piece of wood and there's a hole underneath. Right? He has to put the wood back. He can't just say, "All right, very nice," and walk on. He has to cover it because he's obligated for the safety of others. We have that responsibility. We have an obligation to people spiritually, and we have an obligation to them physically. We have to make sure that they have a safe thing. Right? And it goes through the laws of thieves, and it talks about the example I gave you with the guy's animal. Right? The animal can't get up the hill, and how you have to take care of it. We have here the laws of rape. We can talk about that for a minute, and then we're pretty much finished. On 428 and 429, it's a bit of it's an interesting one. And the last line: if a man shall seduce a virgin who was not betrothed, so in English that means a man seduces a woman who's not married, an unmarried woman, and he has relations with her, he lies with her, and he shall provide her with a marriage contract as his wife. If her father refuses to give her to him, he shall weigh out silver according to marriage contract of the virgins. So if the father refuses to let this man marry his daughter, who was seduced by the man, then the man has to pay for the damages because he had relations with him. So he seduced her is similar to rape. In other words, the difference between it is that he tricks her into having relations rather than forces her. Right? And then we have a number of laws about this, like when it comes to rape, about how things work. But here you have an important thing. On the one hand, the man seduces the woman. Right? He seduces her. So here we're talking about a woman who's still under the providence of her father. Right? We're not talking about a woman who's on her own. It's a woman who's like living in her father's household. Let's say she's above 12, but she could be 16, 18, something like that, and a man seduces her. So basically what he does is he plays on her naivety. Right? He tells her, "I love you, I'm going to marry you," and he has relations with her, and she thinks that that's the case, and then afterwards he rejects her. So in our society, nothing happens. Nothing. What do? You're mad at him. You don't like it. You don't like. The father will go and punch him in the nose, and the father will get in trouble. But there's nothing you can do. A man seduces a woman. A woman's an adult. She has the ability to say no. She didn't say no. It's to her tough luck. Right? If she says that she said no, then it's rape. If she doesn't say no, she says, "Oh, he tricked me. He made me think he loves me. He made me think he's going to marry me. He made me think all of these things." Well, too bad. Don't be so susceptible. You're out of luck. The Torah says no. You have to take into account that people will trick others. They do things to hurt others, and it's not always physical. Right? There's a physical. I come over to you and I'll put a gun to your head and I'll say, you have relations with me or I'll kill you. Right? Well, that's pretty clear. That's rape. But my going and tricking you and making you believe that I'm going to do something for you, or I'm going to act in a certain way with you, or I have respect for you, or I'm going to marry you, and then I don't, and I'm only saying it to get you to do this, it's the same thing. It's just not forcing you physically. It's tricking you into it. And in Jewish society, you can't do that. Now, it sounds a bit demeaning that he pays her father. Right? I didn't pay her. Right? But that's only talking about a case where the woman is under her father's roof. In other words, the father, what happens now is that this woman, right, she wants to go get married. Now, she carries with her the stigma of being a woman who had been seduced, right? Which is not necessarily a bad thing about her, but in the outside world, before you know her, before she's a person to you, she's just a statistic, it's a negative, right? I want to marry a wife who can be tricked like that. I want to marry a wife who just had relations with people, right? So no, I don't want. Is it right? I'm not saying it's right, but does it happen? Yeah, that happens, and it could be very wrong. It could be horrible, but it happens. So in a monetary sense, leave out feelings. She's worth less, right? Not really worth less. She could be a wonderful sterling person, but we're talking on the most base level, the lowest level. He demeaned her. He's responsible for what he did, and in a sense, she is worth less to a potential suitor. Potential. If a woman's a wonderful woman, then she's not worth less. But he hasn't met her yet. He doesn't know that she's wonderful, and he's not going to meet her because I don't want to date a woman like that. I don't want to date a woman who's tricked by some guy, even though it's not her fault. But the ramifications of this man's actions have caused injury to her. Right? She's injured. Right? So therefore, the man gives the money. Why to the father? Because the father supports her, and until the daughter is on her own, right? The father now is going to have to support her longer, because it'd be harder for her to get married. Now, it doesn't. I don't mean that this is the right way. This is the reality of the society of how it was. The real important thing to learn from this mitzvah is not who gets paid, is that he's responsible. That's what's important. And in Canada, you're not responsible. If the girl's underage, you're responsible. If I'm 19 and she's 16, I'm responsible because she doesn't have the ability to choose to have relations. Even if I seduce her, she's not allowed. She's underage. Unless she's 15 and I'm 18. She's underage. She can't choose to do it. Right? But if she's 20 years old and I'm 20 years old and I convince her that I'm the love of her life, I'm going to take care of her forever, and then she has relations with me, and then as soon as it's over, I just throw her out and have nothing to do with her anymore. They don't do nothing to me, nothing, and there's no law against it. But in Judaism there is, because you can't treat people that way. The way you treat people is not just monetary damage; it's how you treat them. You can't do that to someone. I mean, it destroys their self-image. It hurts them. It makes them, and it could be the only person in the world who thinks this woman is worth less is the woman herself. She might think that because I allowed this man to do this. How stupid was I? Maybe I really wanted it. You all know the stories we've heard, right? Maybe I really did entice him. Maybe it really is my fault. I mean, it's not her fault, and the Torah says it's not her fault. He tricked her, and that's what it's telling you. Let's see. So, well, I'll just tell you one more here that's interesting is the next line, which is Machshefa lo tichya. You shall not permit a sorceress to live. Do not, or in the way the Christians say it is, do not suffer a witch to live. That's how they translate that. In other words, if a person is a witch, the same applies to a man. Even though the Torah says it's in feminine because it was more common to find people who said they were witches than you found men who said they were witches. So it was in feminine, but it means anyone. They should not live. So what is that? Is the Torah telling us that there's such a thing as a witch? Because there's no such thing as a witch. You don't need a mitzvah to kill witches. Or is the Torah telling you it means someone who thinks they're a witch and there's no such thing? Right? Is there such a thing as black magic? Is it possible that you can do that? So there's an argument. It's a serious argument. The Ramban and the Ramban argue this, right? And many others, but these are the two fundamental arguments. According to the Ramban, who is very practical, he's like, show it to me, right? The Rambam says there's no such thing as a witch. So why do you kill? So what is the Torah saying? The Torah is saying somebody who acts and thinks and tells people she's a witch, right? That person is a fraud, just like the guy who rapes the woman, right? Who seduces a woman. She's a fraud, and she's leading people astray, and she's hurting people. She should not be allowed to continue, right? That's what the Rambam says. The Ramban says that yes, there is such a thing. That he says that like this: when God created the world, He created the world with a balance. The balance gives us free will. That is, for every choice that you make, you always have a choice. You can do the way I put it is, you can do what you should do, or you can do what you want to do. I'm hungry, I want to eat, okay? And I want to eat now. Right? Well, I only have enough money to go to McDonald's. I don't have enough money to go to a kosher restaurant, and I want to eat now. So I have a choice. Do I go to go out to the unkosher restaurant, or do I find a way to eat in the kosher restaurant? What I want to do versus what I should do. So it has, in order for that to happen, there has to be unkosher restaurants, and there has to be kosher restaurants. Otherwise, I have no choice. If there's only kosher restaurants, then there's no choice. I can't eat unkosher. If there's only unkosher restaurants, then I can't eat at all, right? So there has to be a choice. So the Ramban says, in everything in the world, God created a choice. So if God wants you to follow the Torah, He had to create also a force that was equally powerful in the world that God runs, that you might call black magic, which that God created a force in the world that will equally balance the holiness. There's anti-holiness, and you physically can choose to go either way. God's telling you, don't go that way. It's wrong and it doesn't work. It doesn't work right, but it does have power. Go my way. Go the way of holiness. That's the way a Jew is supposed to go. That's what you should do. You do what you want to do. You want to take love potion number 9, and all the women should love you. So that's right there. You've got, right, that's what you might want, but it's not what you should do. So in the Ramban's opinion, there is such a thing as a witch, and she has power. Right? She uses the power that she's not supposed to use. It's there. We could grab that power. We could use that power, but we're not supposed to. Today, I don't think that you have people who can do this anymore, because we're on a much lower level on both the holy side and the non-holy side. But there was a time when it was possible, according to the Ramban. And therefore, when it says don't suffer a witch to live, it means a woman who comes out and says she's a witch, she's a witch. If she really is a witch, she should be killed, because she's leading people astray, and she's presenting an attractive option that is causing people to go the wrong way. So don't allow her in your community. Get rid of her, or him. Makes no difference who it is. Get rid of them. So it's an interesting argument between the two sides, if there is such a thing. And the Rambam's basically saying, don't let a witch live. He's basically saying, don't be stupid. Don't think there's such a thing as witches. And if she says she's a witch, she's a charlatan. She's a fake. She's just trying to take your money. You should not allow her. Like, you open up the Toronto Sun, in the back, you got a whole page of, come see me. I will answer all of your problems. You will become rich. You'll have all the women will love you. Right? Nobody will make you pay for drinks and bars. All right, all this stuff. Right? Come to see me. Right? That's a fraud. It's a fraud. It's not that it's real and you shouldn't do it. It's fake. There's no such thing. That's not only the Rambam's opinion throughout history. Today, we believe that even if you believe that there's such a thing, there is no such thing anymore. Yeah?
Are there some people who, I guess, have certain talents that help out with the police? I see it on TV.
Like a sixth sense.
Yeah.
So the possibility is there. Well, certainly, we know of through holiness, people who had information and knowledge that wouldn't make sense. Like, I mean, I don't mean that we're talking about people like in history. Like, I'll give you an example. I have a friend whose father was a lovely man. He passed away a few years ago. He was the chief of medicine at Laniado Hospital in Israel, which is a religious hospital. And he was not, at this point, when he started there, a religious man. And he didn't even live in Israel. He lived here. And they came, these Hasidic Rebbes and great rabbis got together, and they wanted to start a hospital in Israel that was following all the laws of the Torah. That was an observant hospital. So they started this hospital, and they wanted people to know, just because it's religious doesn't mean it's not good. So they went around the world and found the best doctors they could and wanted them to come. So they got this guy to come and be the chief of medicine. And he agreed. And he told me, 25 years later, right, when I got to know him, that he sat in meetings with the top doctors, right? I mean, these are guys from around the world sitting in there, and they're discussing patients, right? What do we do? This guy's coming in, needs an operation. What do we do? This one says this. And the Rebbes would be there, right, in the room. Now, you'd think the Rebbes are there because they have to answer legal questions about life and death. Right? But no, they'll say, we think, that we should operate like this. And the Rebbe would say, no, operate like this. And they look like the Rebbe never went to university, doesn't know medical school, never went to medical school. Why should we even listen to him? Doesn't know a vein from an artery. But he'd be right. And he'd be right again and again and again and again. So how's that? So he said, I myself, I was not a religious person. I saw this happen over and over and over again, and I changed my life because of it. So there's definitely an ability through Torah that a person has some extraordinary knowledge. And there might be, outside of Torah, that ability also. You could inherit it. You could have it and not even know you have it. Right? But for the most part today, it's fake. Like I have a rule, and it's not necessarily ironclad, and I'm not in any way casting dispersions on any individuals. But in general, if you have a rabbi who has the ability to know things that it's not logical that he knows, and he advertises that, he says, rabbi's coming to town, come if you need help with your blessings, if your daughter can't get married, if you're having trouble making a living, come see me, I'll give you a blessing. Right? It's a fake. Because in general, this is my opinion only, again, and I don't mean any specific individual. In general, a person who has that ability is not going to advertise it. You're going to hear about it from people, but he's humble. They're quiet, and they don't make a living off it. It's a gift that they have from God, or it's something that they earned through their study and their holiness that they have that ability. But it's not something that they're going to sell. So when you open the Toronto Sun and you see a rabbi in there, it's a fake also, in general, in my opinion. But you see it. Every once in a while we'll get flyers here. Rabbi so-and-so from Jerusalem, or Rebbetzin so-and-so from Jerusalem, who has been known to cure this disease and this disease and this disease, is coming to Toronto. Come see them. And what do? You go to see them, and they don't ask you for money, but there's an expectation that you're going to leave a sum of money on the table when you come in. And you put that down, and then you talk, and they give you a blessing, and you leave. And it might work, it might not work, but I will tell you that, in my opinion, these people who do this are not real. You have people who could be real, right? But they're not going to advertise it, they're not going to sell it. You're not going to be able to find a flyer that says, do this, and the person will help you. If you need people like that, there's people like that, but they don't advertise. So it's the same thing in the newspaper with the other ones. These guys are charlatans. They might really believe in themselves. They might really believe they can do it, but it's not real, right, for the most part. So that's the opinion. So today it doesn't really matter, but that's the opinion of the Rambam.